The church exists to keep us going in the bad times and to encourage us in the good times. Or rather, that's what a strong church does. One that speaks with utter, profound conviction about the authority of God. A strong church. A church as it was meant to be. By mentioning a strong church, I'm suggesting that there is a contrasting kind of church. And I think all we have to do is look about us today in the context of mainstream American religion to realize that weak churches are at least as common as strong churches, if not more so. What would a weak church be? One afraid to challenge the conventional ways of doing business in the world. That's what it would be. One, let's put it another way, too much like the world to challenge its pet assumptions, to call it to account, to call the world to account for misbehavior and wanderings from the authentic vision of who we are, where we came from, and what we're to do in consequence. The kind of church, the weak kind of church, as I have sadly noticed in Moral Follies, is that the churches of the mainstream have become, I call them sometimes chameleon churches. Churches like that very interesting insect, the chameleon, which blend into the background rather than stand out in bold relief. Chameleons we have become because so often we have feared to stand out blazingly and boldly from the context of that culture and to remind that culture, as is the obligation of a strong church, of its own obligations, the culture's obligations to the God who made us all. And that's why we find things in such disarray. Falling membership, for example. Oh my goodness, falling membership. Some of you may recall that, and I wrote about this, I mentioned this in Moral Follies, that in 1965, a year I can remember vividly, being just barely out of college, that the Episcopal Church had a membership of 3.5 million people. A baptized membership of 3.5 million. And a population, an American population of approximately 175 million. Now, would you like to know what the comparable statistics are today? No, you probably wouldn't like to know, but I'm going to tell you anyway, I'm sorry. The comparable statistics are about 1.9 million, and that might be generous, and a population of, well, you know what it is, 300 million. Would you say the Episcopal Church has been losing ground? Yeah, I think I might. And likewise, we have to make this loss of membership correspond to the circumstances in which the loss of membership might have been accomplished. And that is the moral confusion of affirming the culture always, of patting it on the back, of saying, patting it on the head, telling the culture that, oh my goodness gracious, why didn't we think of these things earlier? These modes of liberation and expression that simply were lost to us in time past. And think how much time we've lost because they were lost to us. Saying to the culture, well, we may disagree on some things, but on the essentials, such as poverty and disease and social justice, We're with you. And then the transition is made. The essentials no longer are the salvation of our souls, but the bringing into being in this deformed earth of a kind of creed of human justice that judges the individual needs of men and women by the condition of their stomachs rather than of their souls. The structures of life have broken down. Michael Nazir Ali, one of the great bishops of the Anglican Communion, former Bishop of Rochester, who resigned from Rochester to undertake a more personal kind of evangelistic role in rebuilding the communion and in reaching out to Anglicans outside the Church of England, recently observed, Christian ideas about the sanctity of the human person at the beginning and the end of life are being denied, either on the basis of scientific progress or crude utilitarianism, which speaks of the greatest good or the greatest number, or leaving the yuck factor to decide what is permissible for people. We wait till people are saying yuck before we decide we can't do it. Well, ain't it awful? Yeah, it is. But you've listened to me a long time now tonight, drawing this very bleak picture of the human condition, which reflects upon the condition that we as human beings have inherited with our flesh. And I want to tell you that part of that inheritance is an inheritance of hope. And what I sense here, at this moment, at this very moment in our history and in our lives, what I sense is opportunity and renewal. Opportunity and renewal. That's what I want to talk to you about for the remainder of my time here this evening. St. Paul, not a very popular figure among modern types who think all he did was going around wagging his finger in other people's faces. St. Paul writes in a very famous fragment of the Epistle to the Romans, Romans 8:28, all things work together for good to them that love God, to them who are the called according to his purposes. Now let us examine briefly what he means. If all things work together for good, then the fallen nature of our times can work together for good. In what mysterious way God will probably show us, or our children, perhaps our grandchildren, but in all this, simply because things are evil, because things are bad, we cannot assume that there are no redeeming characteristics in them. We have to depend upon the Lord. Blessings and tribulation is what Paul refers to. And a little earlier in Romans 5, chapter 5, verse 3, he says, and not only so, but we glory in tribulations also, knowing that tribulation worketh patience, and patience experience, and experience what? Hope. Hope. Hope in the mercy and favor of God.